we're going to build a cutting board. And I thought the best way to do this is to take what is like your typical size cutting board. And this is about 18 inches long by about 12 inches wide. And what we're using is entirely local woods that we have here in Concord, Massachusetts. This is a hard maple. And then next we have the black walnut. And then we have a cherry. This is black cherry. And they're in these woods all over town. So I'd like to show you first a couple of different types of cutting boards that we have. This is a thin one, but I don't know whether you can see it or not, but there is a nice grain pattern to this wood on the outsides. This is, again, it's maple, black walnut, and cherry. And then here we have an interesting one, and this is it's called a graduated cutting board because the sizes gradually increase or decrease depending upon which angle you're going at. But this is made out of black walnut, and it also has bird's eye maple in it. And this black walnut is some that I harvested myself. The tree was cut down, and before the contractor actually got it into the chipper, I was able to get it, and I dried it out myself in this barn for a year. And when you do it that way, rather than have it done professionally, the color stays darker. When it is immediately put into a kiln, it tends to lighten up, and so that's why this one is so particularly dark. And again, we have another black walnut and hard rock maple. And then here is an interesting one. This particular one has a little lip on the edge so that when you're working and pushing things, maybe you dough or making bread or something, you're not pushing this all over the table. And this is black walnut and bird's eye maple. So what we have here is what today's project is going to be: maple, black walnut, and cherry. So what I do in this process is I find a piece of wood that's a good candidate to start with, and look what we have here. This is a piece of hard maple, and it's kind of cut up on the side. So what I'm going to have to do is cut it about 18 inches here, and then another cut here, so we'll have enough for 2 boards, and then we'll start dimensioning it by ripping it. This is called ripping when we cut this way, and it's called cross-cutting when we cut this way. So that's how we're going to get started on this project. And then I've already gone and cut up some pieces to be used for these sections. So this is a piece of cherry, and it is 18 inches, but it's only 2 inches wide. And then I cut up some black walnut, and we're going to put those like this. And when we rip this board in the middle, put these pieces in, and we glue it all together. And that's how we come up with this. We have to put it on some clamps and glue it and let it set up overnight. So I've already done that with this particular one, and that will allow us to show the other things we have to do in order to have a completed product. Now, one of them is you've got a round, you don't have to, but a lot of people like the rounded edges on these, and there's a number of ways you can do that. You can come along with a hand plane, or you can actually sand it off. But I have a router, and I'm going to use the router to round off the sides. Once that's done, what we're going to do is sand it, and we're going to start off with about 80 grit, go on 120, 180, 220, and 320, and that's as far as we're going to go with that. When we get to that point, we then put on mineral oil as a finish. So that goes in, and it is food grade quality, and it is absorbed into the wood so that when you're using it with your vegetables or meat, it doesn't, the juices from your vegetables and all don't get absorbed in. And then the last thing we're going to do is put in this combination that has mineral oil and beeswax. And we're going to put that on the surface, buff it out a little bit, and that will be the finished product. Okay, so let's begin by cutting a piece of maple. This is a piece of wood, and it is about 9.5 inches wide. So what I'm doing is when we're making the cutting boards, we're going to have 2 pieces of maple on the outside, and then we're going to have a piece of cherry in the middle and 2 pieces of black walnut. So now for some addition problems. So we've got these 2, the cherry and the black walnut, and between the 2 of those it is about 4 inches, a 2-inch piece and 2 1-inch pieces. So we got 4 inches. So we're going to cut this in the middle, and we're going to ultimately get 12. So I've got to get 8 inches out of this, and it's got to be 2 4-inch sections. So I have more than enough wood to do that. So first thing we're going to do is measure off 18 inches, and we've got we're going to measure off 18 inches. And when you're doing this, if you buy wood at a big box store or anywhere, you've got to look out for the end and make sure that it hasn't started to split or has some problems. On this particular piece, it's fine on this end, but down here we've got a split. So this is going to be waste from here on in, and we have more than enough wood to do that. So we're going to go down to about, I say it's going to be 18 inches, but I'm going to give myself about another inch because oftentimes you make mistakes. So let's say we're going to go out to about 19 inches here. There's a mark right there, and then we're going to go another down here, and that will allow us to make a cut across on our table saw. So once we cut these 2 pieces off, throw this away, the next thing we will do is then bring it onto the table saw and rip saw it. And what we're going to do is rip these edges off, because as you can see they're pretty ragged. And then we're going to get down to 2 4-inch sections. So we will mark those off and make the cut. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut this maple board down to 2 sections here, and then have some waste. And this will give us something to use as the maple pieces on the outside of the cutting board. Once we've cut these into about 19-inch sections, we're going to rip this. First of all, we're going to get rid of the waste over here. You can see it's kind of chipped up, so that's waste. All we have to do is get 2 4-inch sections out of this. So once we've eliminated the waste, we'll cut this down the middle and have 2 4-inch sections, and then 2 more 4-inch sections. So that's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to first put on my glasses and my hearing stuff. Not that I have much hearing left, but you don't want to lose what you do have. And set it up so that we can make our cuts. Okay. All right. Okay, on we go. That's one. And that's the other. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is rip these pieces. So what I want to do is eliminate this waste where it's chipped up, and that should be a fairly easy process. What we're going to do here is hook up this piece so that we can measure our sides. The next thing we're going to do is rip this board down the middle, and that will allow us to get the black walnut and the cherry and sandwich it in between these pieces. It'll be a little wider than 12 inches, but these are the waste sides here, so we'll be able to cut those off later on. But for right now, we're set up to rip this down the middle. So, putting my hearing protection on, standing back, turn it on. And the other one. Okay, so what we've done up to this point is we've cut the pieces of wood we're going to use to make this cutting board. And the trick is to make sure that these edges don't have gaps. And I can see right now that we have a little bit of a gap right here. And so what we do is look, yes, there is a gap. And then what we're going to have to do is get rid of the gap. And we're going to do that by planing on this vise right here. We now take a couple of cuts off of here so that we eliminate the gap. And once we do that, we also want to make sure it's square. So now we're going to check to see if the gap has been eliminated. And sure enough, it's ready to go. So at this point, what we've done is we've squared these pieces off. They seem to fit together quite well. And now what we're going to do is take our clamps out, and we're going to glue these pieces together. When you go to glue these together, there are a variety of different types of glues available, and this is the one I tend to use, and the reason is it's waterproof and it's also food safe. So this is Type Bond 3 wood glue. There are others. This is a Type Bond 2, and it's water resistant, and rather than this, which is actually waterproof. So I would tend to go with this one. This works as a backup. But what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't use this original wood glue, because it doesn't go well with water at all. So when you're actually using these boards, never put them in the sink and put water on top of them. You just clean them off by taking a sponge and getting the things off the surface. But try not to let it sit in water for too long, and never, ever, ever put it in a dishwasher. So what we're going to do now is we are going to glue the pieces together. I've got a couple of different sets of clamps to hold it in place, and before we get started, I have to put some wax paper underneath, and that's for a couple of reasons, but most importantly, I don't want my tabletop all stickied up with glue. So we're going to put these out like this, and then we're going to begin the gluing process. Now, what's interesting about this gluing process is there's a whole bunch of ways to do it. We're going to use this Titebond number 3, and the reason is it's waterproof, and that's really important. And there's a bunch of ways we can do it. We can use this type of bottle and put the glue on the ends like that, or we can put it on and just paint it on like this, or what I prefer to do is just use my finger. That's the easiest way. And it's okay because this is not toxic, this stuff. Okay, so here we go. Bang. We go like that. And we put a little bit. Moderation's the key here, but you don't want to go with too little, otherwise the boards won't bond against each other. So you got to put enough on so that there are no gaps between these two guys. And then we put this piece in and we move it back and forth a little bit to make sure it's getting completely covered. And we go on to the next one. Like this. And we give it a once over to make sure it's going to stick and that there are no gaps. It's very important to do this on the ends, especially because if it's going to separate, it's probably going to be on these ends. So we go and put this piece in and move it back and forth a little bit and then push it down. And the next one. Kind of fun, huh? And then finally the last piece. And what's important here is that once we've got these pieces all glued together, and then this piece goes, yeah, like this. We're going to come down and clamp these pieces together. Here we go. There we go on this end. And then this one. And what you're looking for is to see the glue squeeze out between the joints. If you see any joints that don't have a squeeze out, you got a potential problem there in that there'll be a gap. Next, I use these much more powerful clamps, and you only have to go so far. You don't have to muscle this thing so much that you know, you squeeze all the glue out, but you got to make sure that glue is getting squeezed out consistently. And we're seeing that. So I think we're good with this setup right here. Okay, so what we're going to do is let this sit. You know, it says on the directions on the bottle that you let it sit for 2 hours, but I like to let it sit overnight and make absolutely sure that it has set up. And the other thing that you might want to do is get rid of as much of this glue as you possibly can, because we're going to do an exercise in a moment to make sure none of it is left on when we run it through the planer. So I would get rid of this, and I would use a paper towel to help out on exercise. And we're going to set it up, flip it over, and And once again, make sure that all of your joints are filled with glue and that there's no gaps. So, at this point, we're going to let it set up overnight and come back and see how we do tomorrow. So this has set up overnight, and what we're going to do at this point is we're going to eliminate any glue on the surface, and we do that by just running along and cutting out the big pieces. You know, if we did our job the night before and made sure this was all clear, we would have very little work to do right now, which is actually the case. So at this point, what we will do is take this and run it through a planer over there. And that's one way of doing it, and certainly the easiest. We could put it in a vise and hand plane it, but that's a lot of work. And you know, like, I like the old-fashioned way of doing things, but if you got an easier way and it's much quicker, it probably is the right thing to do. So that's what we're going to do at this point. We're going to plane this flat, and then we're going to come along and cut the lines right here so that we're perfectly squared off. And the next step will be to round off the edges after that. So here we go. At this point, what we're going to do is we're going to run the cutting board through a planer. So what you have to do is set it up so that your exhaust doesn't go flying all over the place. So I got this set up to my vacuum, and then we're going to bring this down to where it just begins to grab. And the most effective way to use this is take little tiny bits off at a time. If you try to go in too quickly, you start to gouge things, and that's especially true if you're using bird's eye maple. You could actually do a lot of damage to the wood. So it's best to just see that's just beginning to grab, and we are about ready to run it through. So let me put my earphones on and turn on the vacuum cleaner. Okay, so one of the things we have to do is round these edges off before we actually start the finished sanding. So there's several ways you can do this. You can use a plane and dimension it off that way. You can sand it. There's a number of ways to do this, but what we're going to do in this case is we're just going to go along with this router. I have a little router table, and inside we just have a regular router, and it has a cutting blade that is going to round off these edges. So I'm going to go turn on the vacuum cleaner so we draw sawdust off, and then turn this on. I'll be right back. I'm going to turn this on, and we're going to round these edges off. And the way we do that is take a look here. You can see we're getting a rounded edge. Otherwise it could kick back with you. So we get this started and we move in the direction that the blade is cutting. So, we're done with this section. Next, we're going to move on to sanding. So, the next step we're going to do is the actual sanding of the board. And what we're going to do is start off with an 80 grit. We're going to go to a 120, a 180, 240, and then a 320. And then we'll be able to put the finish on after that. So I have my sander right here, and what's very important, so that we don't all start coughing, is we have to have our exhaust turned on. So excuse me 1 second. Off we go. So as I said, we're starting off with 80 grit, a little coarse, but gotta get started. We've already done a lot of sanding. I'll show you how to do this. But one thing that is important when you're using a sander like this is that you keep it as flat as possible. Otherwise you can gouge out and the surface won't be smooth. So one of the things you do towards the end is you actually go and make these pencil marks. And while you're sanding, you come through and make sure the pencil marks are eliminated. So let's just do that. And you can see the pencil marks are eliminated, so we know we've gotten the full surface covered equally. So what we do on the last go around on the sanding is that we raise the grain, and that means that we put a little bit of water on the surface so that the fibers in the wood actually stand up, kind of like shaving. And so we're going to do that right now. I have a little bit of water, and we're going to squirt this on. And we're going to come back after half an hour or so. It'll be raised and we'll take that off, and then we'll be able to move on to the final step, which is putting the mineral oil on, and then after that the mineral oil and the beeswax. Okay, so at this point what we've done is we have raised the grain on this, and we've sanded it down and we've felt around to make sure nothing feels uncomfortable, and now we're ready to actually put the finish on. So when you're working with cutting boards, it's going to have food on it. So one of the things I like to do is make sure whatever I'm using is food safe. And on this particular one, it says right here, authorized by the United States Department of Agriculture for use in food processing. So this is a safe white mineral oil. And so what you do is you put it on and you let it set in, and you put several coats on, making sure that that happens. And so what we're going to do now is actually, let me show you this because this looks kind of pretty. We're going to put a little bit of this on like this, and you can see the colors begin to explode here. See how much lighter and brighter the colors are? It really comes out by using this. So we're going to put this on, and we're going to let this again set for about 15 minutes or so, and then we're going to go over it again and just make sure that there are no spots where you can see that it's dry, or that this mineral oil has not been absorbed into the wood. This is like the best part of this whole process, because you actually get to see how the wood looks. Okay, we're going to wait and do this again in a few minutes. So what we've done here is we've come back and we've put a second little coating on this, and what we're doing is we're making sure that there are no spots where you can see that the mineral oil has not been absorbed into the wood. So in other words, it should all be shiny. There shouldn't be any spots that are dull. Give this a few more minutes. We're gonna wipe it off, and then we're going to put on our beeswax, which is going to be the final coating on this. So the last thing we do is we get a mixture of beeswax and mineral oil. It's about 4 parts mineral oil to 1 part beeswax. Do it on a stove, get it heated up so it mixes up well, and then we take this and we just go with the grain and we drive it in as best we can. And what this does is it helps that when you do get moisture on the surface, it doesn't penetrate in too deeply. So this is an exercise that I think you should do, you know, once every couple of months or quarterly, to make sure that your surface hasn't been all cut up by your knives, or had its film taken off by washing it, which you should never do. You should only just briefly, get soap and water and just go over it quickly, but don't let it set for too long. So we do this, and then we let it dry and rub it off, and that's the finished product. In the end, this is what you have.